And what do you make of Jack Smith's brief tonight? It seems like he's getting emotional almost.
Well, I think that he's responding in a very strong manner to this notion of blanket presidential immunity. And in your lead-in, I think that you pointed out one of the strongest parts of his brief, whereas he gave the Supreme Court an out to basically say, look, you do not need to rule universally that the president may not have any sort of presidential immunity regarding criminal acts committed while in office or criminal charges, potential criminal charges. But in this case, when you're talking about a private actor who worked with private individuals to affect a private outcome that would have essentially denatured the entire United States government, that absolutely cannot stand. And so I think that that carve out that Jack Smith made in his brief was brilliant because it's going to give the Supreme Court enough breathing room where they may not necessarily have to rule entirely against Donald Trump. I still think that they're going to rule against him, but this was the icing on the cake that I think made them, or is going to give them enough room to find for Jack Smith in a way that everyone can live with.
Katie, what do you think?
Yeah, I would largely agree with that. Also, I think that the question of whether or not this was within the scope of Trump's duties when he was president, the idea that he was seeking out election fraud. What's so interesting is we saw at the district court level, Judge Tanya Chutkan, she didn't want to rule on that question at all. And so I think we can expect at the hearing in a couple of weeks to hear the Supreme Court justices ask a lot of questions about whether or not this was in the scope of Trump's duties, the acts that he's accused of doing. Because, again, to Charles's point, what Jack Smith is saying is, let's not argue about presidential immunity. Let's argue about the acts on the table. And if you're trying to stop the peaceful transfer of power, that is certainly against what it means to be president of the United States, what it means to uphold the Constitution. Now, one thing the Supreme Court could do that would slow this down quite a bit is they could actually send that question back to Judge Chutkan to rule on at the district court level, setting off yet another wave of decisions and potential appeals.
Oh, boy. All right, let's talk about the hush money case, because that is set to kick off next week. Today, Judge Merchan sent both parties a letter about how jury selection is going to work. Katie, anything stick out to you?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, again, this idea that the jury is going to remain anonymous to everybody but the counsel, but the lawyers and the defendant is still, again, extraordinary to me that this is the sort of measure that one has to take in New York. Generally speaking, you see this happen in gang cases where the jurors could be threatened, where they feel that they could be at risk for participating in our system, in our legal system. So that's quite extraordinary. But then, again, the sorts of questions, this pushback that New York cannot be impartial. It's so clear in this ruling and in other comments, this is not the issue. You can have a very blue Democratic area of the country and still find 12 people who are qualified to serve on the jury. You do not see the Justice Department saying, we don't want the documents case to happen in Florida because Florida is a state that leans red. It is really saying that we have no faith in the legal system, that we can't find 12 jurors. So again, this strong motion saying, yes, we can find the jurors, and also we're going to have to ask them a lot of sensitive questions about their feelings about Donald Trump, whether or not they participated in any extremist groups in the United States, their feelings about campaign finance. That is to be expected, and it will be interesting to see how people answer.
Charles, at what point will Trump's lawyers run out of ways to try to push this trial? Do you think it's starting next week? Are you and I going to be sitting here next Monday night talking about what went down in court? What's your bet?
I think there's a strong chance of that, yes.
So
I'm going to say yes.
I'm
going to say yes. I think that there's an important caveat, and with that, I've got to take a point of personal privilege. Right here in this chair,
I feel a flex.
It is a little bit of a flex because I talked about the fact that a change of venue motion was likely coming way, way back when the indictment first dropped. And here we are, even though the motion to delay the trial was denied, they are still arguing for a change of venue. And that could be something that we could see a delay. But he is absolutely running out of different ways to try and delay this thing. But I want to speak really quickly about this notion of jury selection and Judge Merchan's letter.
After you did that, I told you so dance.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Jury selection is undoubtedly one of the most important parts of any trial. 70%, if not higher, of your trial is won and lost with respect to your ability to choose a jury. What Judge Marchand did with that letter that stuck out to me that is really important is that he said, look, for any juror who self-identifies themselves as unable to serve, we're not even going to interview them. What that does is that significantly cuts down the amount of time that it's going to take in order to choose a jury. For a trial like this, it's unprecedented. You're talking about a former president of the United States of America. Finding a fair and impartial jury in his home state is not an easy dance. And so when you're talking about people who already don't want to be involved and already don't want to go to jury duty, if he's already decided, look, we're not even going to interrogate those people regarding those reasons, he is being very serious about, I'm cutting the fat and I'm getting directly to the people who are going to be here, and we're going to voir dire those people, and you're going to have to make some decisions. That is a very big deal.
He's starting with that. Let's do this. All right, John, up until now, Donald Trump seems to like to go to court. He goes into court. He goes to the courthouse steps. It's like he does his own little rally there. Will this time be different? Because he cares deeply about his image. And now he is going to be cooped up in a courtroom for weeks with his dirty laundry being dragged out, aired out. Are the people running his campaign ready for how Donald Trump could react to this?
Yeah, I mean, the emotional duress of sitting there in that courtroom for 6 weeks, and as you point out, having his dirty laundry aired is something that I'm not sure anybody knows how Donald Trump will react to, but we know that he lashes out when he's angry. We know that he lashes out when he's uncomfortable. And one of the other things that we know about Donald Trump is that this is the kind of trial, this particular one, that probably gets at him most emotionally, right? This idea that he's going to be out there embarrassed publicly, not just minute by minute in the courtroom, but through the news coverage of this over the course of, again, 6 weeks of sitting there and listening to the most salacious details of his life. I'll be in New York next Monday. If there is not a delay, I don't have a bet on the over-under on it starting on Monday, but if it starts on Monday, I'll be there in the court in New York. And I don't think we'll ever have seen anything quite like this in terms of a former president or one who, to your point, cares so much about his image. So I actually think, of all the things he's facing, this is the most likely to A, go to trial, and B, to really get it under his skin personally.
So the other question is the judge ready, Katie? Judge Marchand is about to face one of the most challenging defendants in U.S. history, not to mention every single eyeball when it comes to people across this country and even on the world stage. With what we have seen so far, what are you expecting to see from him when the trial starts?
So this is a really good question, especially given the fact that Trump has now basically said that he would love to be put in prison. He's saying, listen, I'm actually going to flout your rules because I want you to put me in jail. Whether or not he actually decides to go through with that, whether or not he in the end decides that he wants to spend a night or two in prison is we don't know. We can never really know what's going on in his head minute to minute. But he has basically threatened the judge and said, I'm going to threaten your authority every step of the way. So this is going to be, in many ways, a picture of what's to come if any of these federal cases come to trial. We'll see Trump under tremendous strain. We'll see him watch a parade of his former allies, including people like David Pecker of the National Enquirer, people who had helped him, possibly see their testimony come into court. We're going to see people he feels betrayed him. Yes, to John's point, there'll be a lot of emotion. And he has now said he's going to push the law to its limits and push the court to its limits. I don't know that any judge is actually prepared for that moment. And we could see things that we never imagined, including Donald Trump campaigning from a jail cell and it potentially working to his advantage.
Well, he'd like it to, or it'll work with his advantage with his base. But remember, he needs a lot more than his base. Charles, let's talk about Donald Trump's bond that he got last week while he appeals in this fraud case. OK, $175 million from this company in L.A., the guy who runs it, Hanky, basically a subprime auto lender, like a payday lender for cars. The way this is supposed to work, the underwriter, this company in L.A., they pay if Trump loses the appeal. But when people looked at the details today, they don't. Donald Trump would be the one to pay. So what was the point of this bond to begin with?
The point was to buy time and get Letitia James off his back. But what we have seen now that they have gone through the contract.
A fraudulent contract from kind of a sketchy bond guy for a case that was all about fraud?
Correct. The irony, right? And so now Donald Trump has put Letitia James in a very precarious position because she has to make the decision as to whether she wants to undergo a bond source hearing. And what that typically means is they will go into detail and examine the legitimacy of the source that is being provided to establish this bond. If, in fact, that is done, it's not going to help the AG's office from a time perspective because it's just going to delay that further and further down the road, and it's going to allow him to do what he wants to do. If she does not make that move, then Donald Trump sits with this fraudulent contract and allows that to cover the $175 million that's necessary to sustain the bond. So he is essentially playing checkers again while other people are trying to just get an honest answer and hold him accountable.
Hey everyone, MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.